this month in George magazine where you talk about dating. Capital offense is your column? Tell us about this.
Yeah, I was hoping this wouldn't be on the stands yet. I proposed it to them because I have a very important point to make about dating in Washington. And immediately after calling the editors and saying, how about an article on dating in Washington, I got cold feet and I started calling them every 10 minutes for the next 2 hours proposing an alternative article. They said, no, write this. I haven't seen the magazine version of it yet, but I went to a party on Saturday night in Washington, and women were coming up to me all night, women I did not know, just saying to me, you're totally right. You're totally right.
And you're totally right about what?
It's not, I did see it on the wall of George. It's not what they claim, which is that I say something about how men in Washington are tedious, dull, appalling, annoying. It's one simple, narrow, constructive criticism, I like to think, and that is that they don't know how to ask for dates.
Only in Washington?
I think so.
And that's why you get on the shuttle every weekend and go to New York?
Well, yes, it is.
Well, those who want instructions on this in Washington need to read Ann Coulter's article, but we need to go on to not such a frivolous item this morning, or maybe this isn't so frivolous. Maybe you'll probably have this better read than any column you've ever read.
That's probably right.
What have you been reading in the paper this morning you want to talk about?
I've turned to the most crucial sentence on, our fabulous war in Yugoslavia. It turns out the Serbs are sending in yet more troops, so that's how well the bombing has been working. The really wonderful sentence you have to turn to page A14 for. And the reporter just sort of blandly notes, but the decision to send in fresh recruits indicates that the Serbs are not yet ready to give up. Not yet ready, they're not giving up. We are losing.
So what's your proposal of what this government should do now?
Well, I mean, it's a mess the president has gotten us into. It seems to me, of the many bad options, as the administration itself says, the two main options we have now are sending in ground troops, having some utter catastrophe, another Vietnam-style quagmire, or abject humiliation with half the world's countries hating us. So at this point, I'm rooting for humiliation.
Before we take the first call, are you going to run for Congress in Connecticut against Chris Shays?
I think someone will run, and it might be me.
And when will you decide?
Probably early 2000.
And why would you do that?
There are a number of reasons. I probably shouldn't go into too many of them, unless you want to have Chris Shays on tomorrow morning.
Well, it's not a problem yet. No one's
one
announced.
of them is, of course, that he's not only one of 5 Republicans to vote against the impeachment of President Clinton, but pretty much campaigned against it, spoke on the House floor the day of the vote against it, had that town hall meeting, and a few weeks later introduced a bill that would repeal the 22nd Amendment. Right
here on the front page of Roll Call today, it says Shays and others will sign discharge petition this week. That's on campaign finance. Where would you stand on that?
That's one of the many reasons I think Chris Shays, along with many other moderate Republicans, should be challenged and should go. It's a violation of, in fact, that's what I wrote about in the current Human Events. It is a demonstrable violation of our First Amendment rights. This idea, I mean, if you think about it, you can spend $2 million if you'd like to, if your free speech happened to consist of something like Debbie Does Dallas. But if your free speech consists of vote for Senator Blowhard, oh no, the government limits you to $2,000. This is an incumbent protection plan. They can say whatever they want. They have taxpayer money to fly around to the district, bring pork home with our money. It's not like the government is out raising money. Politicians will always be bought. As long as they're giving away $1.3 trillion of taxpayer money. That Trent Lott Center, it seems to me, is an example of the many, many ways you can get around campaign finance reform if all you want to do is buy a politician. 2 of the main companies with pending legislation before the Senate this year have each given $1 million for this third world style monument to Trent Lott at the University of Mississippi.
Our guest is from New Canaan, Connecticut originally, went to Cornell University, got a law degree from the University of Michigan. How many copies of High Crimes and Misdemeanors did you sell?
Oh, I'm glad you ask. About 250,000.
250,000.
Though some of them completely sold, taken home, and with pages bent, it's just about it's over 100,000, but they've been sold to bookstores of about a quarter million.
Louisville, Kentucky. Good morning. Welcome.
Yeah, good morning, Brian. Good Morning, Ann. It's actually quite ironic that you're on the show today from George Magazine. After I read this, you'll completely understand. I got a copy of this from Mitch McConnell's office, senator from Kentucky. This is from a director of a corporation based out of Kentucky. It's titled To the American People, Slobodan Milosevic and President Emeritus Clinton. I thought that was very cute. It drops down several spaces, and it's centered, Thanks JFK. This is short but very sweet. You can probably get a copy of this from Senator McConnell's office. Why America Slept Again, Adolf Hitler, underlined, Slobodan Milosevic, underlined, and us, underlined. With our alarm clock blaring, what do? We hit the snooze button again. Wake up, America. Our forefathers and mothers fought for our preeminent leadership role in the world. Now that we haven't, let's lead. Let's lead NATO forces on the ground and liberate the concentration camps of Kosovo, for it is our responsibility. Drops down a couple spaces. This is where it gets really good.
Who wrote this?
Gentleman's name is Charles B. Sprouse, Director, President Emeritus of FlexTrack. Drops down a couple spaces, gets really good. Profiles in courage, again. Let us build a true volunteer army. Those Americans whom are willing to volunteer for a mission to Kosovo, followed by a 2-month low-impact basic training, would truly represent profiles in courage in their mission to rescue persecuted Jews. Semicolon, I believe, then it goes, I mean the persecuted, period, and then he actually has in brackets spelled out, period.
Okay, I'm going to let you go and let Ann Coulter react.
Yeah, I think the lines for happy volunteers signing up at the recruitment offices are dwindling now for the war in Kosovo. I don't think we'd have a lot of volunteers for it. I think the color does raise an ironic aspect of the president's position, and that is, on one hand, he says Milosevic is like Hitler. On the other hand, he swears off ground troops. If Milosevic is like Hitler, we should not be swearing off ground troops, although, as William Safire points out, once not only Senator McCain, but Tony Blair started saying, why are you swearing off ground troops? He not only did not swear off ground troops, but claims he never said that.
St. Augustine, Florida. Good morning.
Good morning. Ian, I'd like to congratulate you for all the personal attacks you've withstood from liberal Democrats on TV over the past few months. It's been amazing. I mean, some of them are downright personal. I think you've done a wonderful job.
Thank you.
And what I called about was an article in the paper, Clinton ally calls for Reno to resign over China spying. And it's about Robert Torricelli, who we know in the past has lied plenty of times over the congressional hearings. He's pushed for the cover-up of everything Bill Clinton's done. And to me, I smell a rat. I mean, I think he's just trying to, you know, they're getting ready to throw Reno overboard because they must be getting so close to the president now. And I just hope that somehow you can convince Republicans just to go on the attack.
Thanks.
I wish I could.
Why were the Republicans calling for Janet Reno's resignation, and what difference would it make?
Well, there are many, many reasons to call for Janet Reno's resignation. I think
yesterday,
the most recent reason is that, let's see, and what happens when the FBI wants to wiretap a government official is they appeal to a special court. It has to be approved by the Attorney General. In 1996, I think there were over 700 applications made by the FBI, approved by the Attorney General, sent to the court and approved. 1997, it was something like 739. The special court denied one request for technical reasons. They're almost invariably, as you can tell by these huge numbers, approved by the court. There was only one of now, you know, well over 1,000, close to 2,000 requests made by the FBI in 1996 and 1997 that Janet Reno refused to even submit to the special court. And that was of the suspected spy at Los Alamos, Wenho Lee.
Acton, Massachusetts. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm a first-time caller, and I'm not calling about any article I've read in the newspaper. I'm calling about something that I have not read in the newspaper, or very little about. I realize there are horrible human atrocities taking place in Kosovo right now. I don't believe that's what this war is all about. I've only heard once or twice about the starry mines in northern Kosovo that supposedly have enough gold, zinc, cadmium, magnesium, and other precious metals to last the world for, I heard, 1,200 years. Why have I not heard more about that, and what more can you tell me about that?
I don't know about that. I do think there is good reason not to be entirely sure why we're in the war, since we have a commander-in-chief who lies. As I mentioned earlier, William Safire has this excellent article quoting Clinton and then quoting him denying that he had just said what Safire quotes him saying. As, for example, the ground troops example. Another one is when he first knew of spying at Los Alamos, or suspected spying. On March 19th, last year, he denied it, that he knew anything about it. It turns out that the year before, as of November, he knew about it. And he's pulling another, sort of sexual relations definition by saying, well, we don't know that it was in the labs. I said we didn't know about it in the labs, as opposed to just suspected spying.
There's a special report in USA Today on 4 countries in Africa, and they say that 11.5 million people have died in sub-Saharan Africa because of AIDS since the early 80s, and that 22 million will die who are currently there in the next few years. What do you think of this story? And the suggestion is made in here that we're not paying any attention to this while we pay attention to several 100,000 people in Kosovo.
I think the more interesting comparison, because of the control group aspect to it, is Rwanda. That was real genocide, and a very efficient genocide. If I could just say, while everyone's talking about guns and guns killing people, the most efficient killing of late was in Rwanda, and that was accomplished with machetes, not with guns. That was genuine genocide as opposed to a violent border dispute. And we didn't do anything there, and I think there is no question. I suspect that it is because that was Africa, though it may have to do with the president's peniological interests.
The director of President Clinton's Office of National AIDS Policy, Sandra Thurman, says that believes that the sub-Saharan epidemic has been met with indifference by Americans and to some extent by their government, which spends $74 million a year on the AIDS program in the region. In contrast, Congress this month voted to spend $1.1 billion to assist roughly 750,000 Kosovo refugees. When you're looking at the whole generation of adults and children in jeopardy, we ought to be able to hold hands and sing Kumbaya around that, Thurman says. We can't do anything if we can't do this. Lansing, Michigan. Go ahead, please. Hello, Lansing.
Yeah, hello, Ann.
Hi there.
I read one of your human events column, and in it you said, go ahead, Mr. President, shoot Hillary, have sex with Buddy, do it in front of the White House camera. The stupid party isn't going to lay a glove on you. Don't you think that's going a little bit too far? And you're supposed to be such a wonderful, innocent person. And one day you were on Geraldo's, and you were giving us a nice lecture of all kinds of penises, shapes, and everything. So I don't think you're such a nice person, and besides your looks are showing.
It's interesting how people get very upset about describing what the president has done, but not what the president actually did. There seems to be some selective outrage going on.
Anything you want to follow up with, caller? Hello, caller. Are you still there? I guess
Didn't
not.
you hear the phone being slammed down, Brian?
I did not. Algonac, Michigan. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Brian.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ann.
Morning.
I'm a great fan of yours, so that's much different than the previous caller. I'm also a great fan of the voucher system in the school. Now, I'd like to ask you a question that I have never heard asked on TV in regards to all these school shootings. I think we've had 10 in the last 2 years. I'm pretty sure that's close to it. Now, if we notice, all these shootings have been in public schools. We haven't had one shooting in a Catholic school. Now, the main question that pops out at me is why? What are they teaching in Catholic schools that they're not teaching in public schools?
What do you think, caller?
I think it's a basic belief of respect for every human being, starting with, here we go, abortion. I know all my other friends out here who can't stand the Catholic position on abortion will say, here's another nut. But if you can't respect the life of an innocent baby, how can you respect the life of a 13, 14, 65, 75-year-old man like I am?
Thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to. I'm tempted to accuse the caller of plagiarism because, yes, right after the Littleton shootings, I was pointing out that it's funny how none of them have happened at private schools. They've all been at government schools. Now, I know there are a lot more government schools than there are either parochial or any sort of private school, charter school, voucher school. But still, as the caller points out, it's I thought it was more like eight schools. But whatever. 8-0, 10-0. I think the abortion point is a good one, but moreover, it occurred to me after this Littleton incident. Remember about a year ago, it was sort of overtaken by the impeachment. But there was a teacher in the New York public schools who got in trouble for telling her students about, you know, Jesus Christ and her personal relationship, her Savior, Jesus Christ. It was a minor scandal, sort of overshadowed by impeachment at the time. But if a teacher at Littleton had noticed these two kids seemed a bit troubled and had spoken to them about Jesus Christ, she would have been thrown out. I don't know that having Jesus Christ mentioned by itself is the answer, but that is something that cannot be done at a public school.
Are you religious?
Yes.
What's religion?
My father's Catholic and my mother is Presbyterian, so I'd rather not say on air.
Tampa, Florida. Go ahead, please. Hello, Tampa. You're on the air with Ann Coulter. Good morning.
Yes. My name is Cal Simone. I wanted to ask, calling from Tampa, I wanted to ask Ms. Coulter, I had two quick questions, if you would, please. One, I was listening to your fellow writer, I believe his name is Hutchins from Vanity Fair, his book,
Christopher Hitchens.
No One Else Left to Lie To? Or
Great title.
And I wondered to get your opinion on that. Yeah, it is a pretty good title. And also, here on Public Access, we saw yesterday a 2-hour tape. It was a pretty thorough expose of the Clinton Collective's doings, and it tied Clinton through the Arkansas Development Finance Administration, laundering hundreds of millions of cocaine money.
Caller, who did the tape?
Well, that's what I was getting to. It wasn't identified. It was on the lower right-hand corner, there was an emblem that said The Red Zone, and I wondered if anyone else had ever heard of this. I'd like to get a copy of the tape because a physician claimed that he had personal knowledge of Clinton entering a hospital, a small private hospital, for 2 separate incidents of drug overdose, cocaine, and had his sinuses surgically repaired because he had eaten them up with cocaine. I just thought...
Look, can I ask you a question? If that were true, and there's absolutely no proof here this morning it's true, but if that were true, do you think that would change the mind of all those people out there who are still with the president? I don't mean that negatively, but do you think, I mean, was your mind made up before you ever watched this thing?
Well, my mind was not made up because I haven't read Ms. Coulter's book. I'm a student, so I'm chronically poor, and I'm waiting for it to come out in paperback. But the 43% of the voters who voted for him undoubtedly wouldn't. They supported him even though there's prima facie evidence that he committed perjury. The article, I believe number 8, returned against Richard Nixon for misleading the public, didn't seem to apply to Clinton for some reason.
What do you think of running tapes like this without any identification on where it comes from?
That's why I'm at 9 o'clock calling my local cable access people to find out who did it and whether I can get a copy of it.
And if you find out, would you please call us back, because there are lots of accusations that are thrown around and we don't have any concrete evidence whether they're true. So get back to us if you can. Let us know. Thanks. Ann Coulter.
Well, with Clinton, I wouldn't rule out anything as completely implausible and probably not true, but I mean, as you say, is that going to change anyone's mind? We have this guy on videotape committing perjury, suborning others' perjury, tampering with witnesses, engaging in kinky sex in the White House while foreign dignitaries wait in the next room. That is pretty much undisputed. So if finding out that he used cocaine 20 years ago, I mean, even if it's true, you're right, so what? What we know about this guy is more devastating.
The reason I ask is because there's a lot of tapes being sold and things like that, and I wonder to what end and what, you know, do you have any ideas on why so many people will buy these tapes? Or buy your book, as a matter of fact. It's now that it's over. Is it coming out in
I would
paperback?
like to mention to the caller, it won't be coming out in paperback, so rush out and buy it now.
It will not be coming out in paperback.
No, I mean, I have no intention at the moment. Still selling in hardcover.
Los Angeles, go ahead, please. Ann Coulter.
Hi, I'd like to ask, what do you mean by a government school? I think you use a lot of terms that are very derisive, and what do you mean by a government school?
A school run and funded by the government and sued as a representative of the government.
And everyone who works there is a terrible person?
No. No, I think you've made quite a leap there.
Well, I probably did. You helped me out, though.
Well, what about you, sir? Do you have any reaction to the whole issue?
What issue?
Do you like public schools, I guess?
Yes, that's part of what this country is founded upon.
We'll go back to the caller, though, suggesting that in the Catholic schools, the private schools, there's been nothing like the incident in Conyers, Georgia, and all that. Do you agree with that analysis? Does it make a difference?
I agree with that. I think it's true. I don't think it makes a difference, and I don't think that's any reason to be derisive about public schools.
Thanks.
You know what the funny thing is about the debate over public schools in this country, it seems to me, is everything else is run with a free market. You always feel like when you're talking about how, private schools and a voucher system would work, as if you're trying to describe to some old Soviet woman how she's going to get bread if the government doesn't provide it. How on earth will we get bread? No, in fact, you'll have all kinds of bread. Wonder bread, bagels.
Las Vegas.
Croissants.
Next for Ann Coulter. Go ahead, please.
Oh, Ann. You mentioned this deal in the epidemic in Africa, this AIDS epidemic, and the apparent lack of concern by the U.S. government for getting involved, heavily involved, in solving this problem and the massive amounts of deaths that are taking place there. As an American citizen, I'm very appalled, especially as a black American citizen, to see the country that I claim to be my own participate in massive genocide by apathy. Now, there seems to be a very effective way of totally depopulating a continent just by doing nothing. Are there any senators that are standing up against this?
Thanks. Let me show you, though, also, this is a chart in USA Today. Today, they have several pages devoted to this. An epidemic of orphans. Cumulative number of children estimated to have been orphaned by AIDS at age 14 or younger by the end of 1997. North America, 70,000. Caribbean, 46,000. Latin America, 91,000. North Africa and Middle East, 14,000. Sub-Saharan Africa, 7.8 million.
Boy.
200,000 in South and Southeast Asia. I mean, it's just, this is it right here, right below here. Any reaction to him?
I don't know if there's any pending legislation.
If, by the way, if you were to run for Congress, have you ever done it before?
No, actually, I have no desire to in the abstracts. I don't think you really get anything done. I mean, having worked for the Senate.
Senator Spencer Abraham?
Yes. I did not find it really as fast-moving a process as I would have liked.
So why would you even think about doing it then?
It would be candidate-specific.
Candidate-specific? I mean, you would be moved to go against Chris Shays?
Yes.
What kind of a campaign would you run?
I think like Jesse Ventura. No, I'm not entirely joking about that. It would not be a careful campaign. I assume you watched the Sunday morning talk shows yesterday, and it occurred to me, bring back Monica. I can't bear to watch these politicians with, their completely empty bromides, one after another, standing up or sitting down and saying that, he will stand for strong families, better jobs, reduction in drug use. What, as opposed to the other guy who wants more drug use and bad jobs and broken families? It's just unbearable listening to these things. At least I can assure you my constituents will know where I stand.
Give us something that you stand strongly about.
I'm pro-life.
Would you make that a part of a campaign in New Canaan, Connecticut? Fairfield County, Connecticut? Would that work?
Well, no, that is not. I suspect my position is a minority position, but I wouldn't lie about it, and I would do what I could, which frankly isn't very much in the Congress, to promote a pro-life position. I am strongly pro-gun, as I described in that Human Events article, and mainly pro-freedom and reduction in the federal government.
Frederick, Maryland, you're next.
Good morning. This is Norman from Frederick, Maryland.
Morning, Norman.
I think a perfect ticket in the year 2000 would be Ventura for president and you for vice president.
Why have her be the vice presidential candidate?
Well, you could turn it around the other way. It wouldn't matter.
He has more experience.
And he is a governor so far.
That's right.
On these government schools, I think if they're going to fund them, I think we should require that they have 50% male teachers. I'll hang up and take your and let you.
As opposed to what it is now?
There's not 50% male teachers in the classroom. It's about 90% female.
What would that do for everybody?
Well, I think it would. I think men can relate to boys better, and I think they can tune into them better. And boys tend to. Men can anger boys, but women teachers can cause little boys to go into rage, which we don't deal with very well.
It must have happened to you. It sounds like you're remembering your past.
I sure do.
and you went into a rage over a female teacher.
Oh, yeah, when I was in the 7th grade.
Okay.
I'm glad you solicited the additional comment, because I thought the caller was just making a joke about how, which is a problem with the government schools, and that is they're subject to, you know, every law the government passes, they are subject to lawsuits. It seems to me you could bring a lawsuit if you were turned down as a teacher at a government school, if you were a male, and yeah, I mean, that seems to me it would be a good basis for a discrimination lawsuit. That's part of the problem. These public schools have to be very careful about lawsuits and everything that's said, and have to be very careful about talking about God in any context.
Let me go back to what we were talking about earlier, a strong position on abortion, on guns, and on men in Washington not having the ability to ask for dates. Give us a third something you feel strong about.
Well, maybe this sounds like a bromide, but I think it isn't, and that is freedom. I think that the most freedom-promoting government construction is the one the framers gave us, and that is the Constitution. I think Republicans are making a big mistake when they describe federalism as the federal government sucking up all of the states' money, all of the taxpayers' money, and then handing it out in block grants to the states, but with no strings attached. That's the new Republican idea of federalism. No, actually, you're not supposed to be taking that money. There is no constitutional provision for a national pension system being run by the government. But no, we're wedded to all these middle-class entitlements. I mean, even if the left means what it says about redistribution, that doesn't explain the enormous middle-class entitlement programs. These are all just sops for incumbents to be reelected. If we return to a constitutional system, I think everybody would be a lot happier.
Coming up later, in about 30 minutes, Itamar Rabinovich, who was a former ambassador to the United States, appointed by Yitzhak Rabin from Israel, and he'll be here for about an hour or so to talk about the situation. And actually, it's not that long, I don't think. I'll check it out here. Meanwhile, let's go to Centerville, Virginia. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Brian, I have a couple things here. You started off the article with this segment with the dating article. What is it all about? I mean, she never really explained it. It just seems to have been, I don't know, I'm not sure, you know.
Well, you know, that's a fair question, because actually I had read it, so I jumped to which is not a good interviewer. I'd read it and jumped to the conclusion rather than to explain it all. Anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm just a little bit disappointed in you having her on this morning.
Why is that?
Well, normally I watch C-SPAN for serious discussions, and she's been giggling, and you know, her discussions just unserious. You know, I watch her a lot on MSNBC and.
No, you don't.
or
NBC.
Either one of those. I have seen you there, or Geraldo, and. I'm just a little bit disappointed. Thank you.
Okay.
You know, don't you find it interesting that, I mean, when I've watched your show, I've never noticed conservative critics, of your liberal or socialist reporters calling in and complaining about how the person looks or launching into personal attacks. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I haven't noticed that.
I would say this, not in defense of anything, but about just about anything that could be said has been said here over the last 20 years about every kind of human being that's sat here. But
no,
I
think I have a lot of experience with this, and this is sort of the level of liberal argument in this country today, and it is not just, you know, the random nuts like the last caller calling in and denouncing me talking to you as if I'm not here. I mean, you see it, you know, on Politically Incorrect. The way the conservatives are literally personally attacked. I saw it a few weeks ago with, I forget who the conservative was, but they were talking about gun rights. It was Pamela Lee Anderson and the head of PETA. And Pamela Lee Anderson and the head of PETA said to the conservative, I think it was Floyd Brown, they accused him of having a small manhood. They told him he was in bad physical shape. They made fun of him for being a hick and a moron. They cannot discuss the issues. It's always a personal attack, and that's basically what, you know, the liberal ideology has come down to in this country.
let's go to, is it Beaufort or Beaufort, South Carolina?
Yes.
What's the name of your town?
Beaufort.
Beaufort. Good morning. You're on with Ann Coulter.
Hello?
Go right ahead,
Hi there.
please.
Oh, can I talk?
You can talk.
Oh, I got through. I'm excited.
Go right ahead, please.
Hi, Ann?
Hi there.
Hi. I'm just so thrilled I got through to you. I have hope when there are people like you in the world.
Thank you.
You know what my reward for my son-in-law going up to Washington to a meeting? He's working for the federal government after being in the military for a long time. He brought me back the Washington Times, and
America's freest newspaper.
Very, very liberal newspaper, and I started to lose faith. And it's people like you that give me hope. So I just want you to know, don't let them get you down.
Thank you. It's because of callers like you and letters from people like you that I don't.
Is there anything that you do in these circumstances that you think, you know, spikes the audience to call up and be either loving or hateful?
You know, it's funny. I never feel it in myself, but I can see it when it happens to other people. And that is, they really don't like effective conservatives. You go on and and sell out, don't make effective points, they love you. They love you. That's, you know, how the Republican Party generally picks its presidential candidate. Which Republicans do the New York Times like the most?
And Coulter, years ago, used to work as an intern for Evans and Novak. What year?
Let's see, what was that? 89, I think. I guess it was about a decade ago.
Panama City, Florida. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
I just wanted to call in and let Ann know how much I support her.
Thank you.
You know, I have a theory about what's been going on the last couple of years. There's about a third of the people that will support Clinton no matter what he did or what he does. There's about a third that won't support him no matter what he does. And then there's the other third that seem to just want to let it slip under the rug and not even realize what's going on. And what I think that you do so great, because you are so articulate, is that you are able to help that other third realize what's going on in this country. And I want you to know how much I appreciate you for what you do.
Thank you. We've talked about 3 issues: abortion, guns, and freedom. Give us a 4th that you feel strongly about. Anything.
And that's freedom/federalism.
Got it.
Real federalism.
Got it.
Free speech, that is to say, the government not limiting how much I can spend on political speech. That is core First Amendment speech. Despite the fabulous Hollywood movies promoting Hustler magazine, that wasn't really what the framers had in mind when they wrote the First Amendment. The idea was that you would have free commerce in political speech. And they can call it financing for speech, but they may as well say as I've written in the most recent Human Events article, that, oh yeah, you can practice whatever religion you want, but you can only spend $2,000 on it. You can buy guns, but you can only spend this much money on guns. If you limit how much money people can spend on something, the right is being taken away. And the only speech that you are limited in how much you can spend it on, how much you can spend on it, is political speech. That's what campaign finance reform is. It limits how much private citizens, as opposed to the editorial page of the New York Times, as opposed to incumbents in Congress, or wealthy individuals, can spend on themselves for political speech.
Albany, Georgia. Good morning.
Yes. I would like to ask her a question. Hey, she said people, excuse me a minute, like in private school, they wait on the government to give them something. What about vouchers? Wouldn't the government be giving vouchers? And does President Clinton run this country by himself? Do Congress have anything to say about the policies that go on in the United States? And why are you blaming President Clinton for every little thing that happens with the wall, with the troops? Do you want to send troops in there where you can say, oh, President Clinton is getting our young boys killed, so you can have something else to accuse him of? Thank you.
Albany, Georgia.
I think you might have switched to a different TV station, because I was not accusing President Clinton of anything having to do with the government schools. And the reason he does have some responsibility for Kosovo is that he is the commander-in-chief. And what else was I accused of that was not that was not quite accurate?
Well, she said that, you know, that don't you blame anybody else in the government? Doesn't Congress have something to say about all this?
That was straight out of government schools. I've blamed President Clinton for Kosovo in this program so far. Yes, if you were a Human Events reader, you'd know I blame the Republicans quite a bit.
Where would you put President Clinton in the history of the 41 men that have been president?
Clearly the worst. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't think there's any question that he will go down in history as one of the worst, and not one of the worst, as the worst. I think he has done great damage to this country. I think he is at the pinnacle of his esteem right now. It has occurred to me that throughout history, at least this century, in all of the great battles, Whittaker Chambers, Alger Hiss, the Vietnam War, Richard Nixon, Watergate, liberals have not come off so well as time goes by. Conservatives, I mean, to the extent you can call some of these things conservative issues, have always gone up in esteem. If this is as good as Clinton is right now, and you remember what his lawyer said about him during the impeachment trial, it's only going to get worse.
Knoxville, Tennessee. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Hi.
Kudos to C-SPAN. And the caller earlier about the guns taken to school. Well, I've thought about this, and I've told many of my friends that it is very strange that they take their guns to school and shoot up the schools, but you don't hear about them shooting up their favorite McDonald's or their favorite mall. So the question has to be asked, what's happening at school that prompts them to go shoot up their school? And it's just got to be bad education is my perspective. The concept of vouchers is a wonderful ideal. I'm sure it has many cons as well as the pros, but just to give people a choice seems to be the only American ideal that education can bring to itself right now, meaning that the only fresh ideals in education is simply that.
Thanks.
One interesting thing about the voucher issue, I think, is you read, year after year how American students lag far behind other countries in math abilities, reading abilities, at least K through 12. In the college years, suddenly American students pull way ahead. Now think about that. What's the difference between K through 12 and colleges? I don't know why it is so baffling for people, or so, difficult for people to understand how vouchers or private schools would work. The teachers would be the same. The school structures would be the same. I mean, they act like it would be some completely foreign system. The only difference is, sort of at the top, there would be a lot fewer superintendents. I'm quite sure of that. And there'd be more freedom.
In light of your article in George, for June about dating. I just wanted to check with you on the following article in today's roll call. Representative Hill blasts Challenger's lifestyle, is what it is, and it's by John Mercurio, and I'll read a little bit of it. Bracing for his third tough House race, Representative Rick Hill, Republican of Montana, launched an early attack against his likely Democratic challenger, Nancy Keenan, warning that he'll focus his campaign on her lifestyle. I'm a family man, I'm a grandparent, I'm a small businessman. Nancy has never been married and obviously has no children, Hill said in an interview Friday, 3 days after Keenan, the state school superintendent, kicked off the 5-city tour to announce her campaign for Montana's lone House seat. If you haven't been there, you don't know what it's like to raise kids and the struggles and challenges of that lifestyle, added Hill, who has 3 adult sons and is married to his second wife, Betty. I have some understanding of what it means to run a household full of kids, and she's basically been working for the government all of her life. What do you think of that?
If he
He's
supports,
a Republican.
If he supports enormous tax cuts, which would be helpful to the family, I keep hearing, Clinton talk about how, he wants to, parents aren't spending enough time with their children. Well, there's a reason for that. The government is now taking 40% of a family's income, unlike in the 50s, so women have to work, and of course they're spending less time with their children. I mean, if this guy is going to turn this into policies, but I suppose it's a rhetorical flourish. However, what I really suspect this is coming out of, and perhaps I'm wrong about this, I've been misquoted and misportrayed in the media enough that I don't know that I want to jump on this guy. But it seems to me, as long as both of the parties stand for big, enormous, behemoth government with only slight details being changed, then this is the sort of thing that becomes relevant in an election. Whether or not the president wears boxers or briefs, whether or not the candidate is married, has children or does not have children, that isn't what the dispute should be about. I really don't care if a representative, I don't know, has a horrible lifestyle. I don't know what that would be. I never really thought it was so horrible to be single. I would be a little more interested in his policies. But this is what politics has come down to. As long as Republicans don't stand for anything, and both parties are the one-party big government state.
The Republican Party chairwoman in Montana says she just doesn't really fit in with the lifestyle of mainstream Montana. And she is Sue Alexic-Aki, whose husband, Larry Aki, is Hill's, meaning Rick Hill's chief of staff. Madison, Connecticut. You're next for our guest, Ann Coulter. Good morning.
Good morning, Ann. I think you do a terrific job. Been following you for a long time. What I wanted to ask you was about Chris Shays, and of course I had heard that you might be running against him. I think it's a terrific idea. But in light of that, I was thinking, what would you say to him if you were in a debate with him about the Shays or Leon Shays Act? And I guess what I'm concerned about is the loss of our freedom of speech in that act. I wonder if you could be more specific about it, especially that although it came up last year, it looks like it's coming around again. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about that, what you would say to Chris about it.
Thank you. Well, fortunately, Senator McConnell is saying it all. He seems to be the only one. I mean, he really is an example of Senator McConnell of what you want out of politicians, and that is he actually will stand up and defend the Constitution and the First Amendment, and it's not just, running away and backing down and passing some little half measure. This is typically the problem with Republicans. They concede the main point to the Democrats, such as on guns recently, that as if, new gun laws would do anything. They concede the point that all of this money in politics is a bad thing, and if only we could have limits, but we just can't get around it. Whereas Senator McConnell just comes out and says this is a First Amendment right. It's free speech. So I suppose that is the main argument.
Danbury, Connecticut, for Ann Coulter.
Hello, Ann. I'd like to ask you a question, please. The Chinese ambassador to the U.S. was on Meet the Press last week. You said there has been no Chinese espionage. I was wondering, do you think there might be a possibility that there hasn't been any Chinese espionage and that the Republicans have conjured this up for their own political gain, to use it to make President Clinton look bad to the country and sabotage our stabilized, ongoing relations with China? And I'm glad you're on, because you are the highest form of immorality in the country, and you're teaching our children a wonderful thing. Keep spreading your poisonous venom. I'm sure everybody has caught on to you by now, and if they haven't...
What's that poisonous venom?
All the comments that you make about the president, to me, that's comparable to treason.
Like what?
All the things, the bad things you said, and I think it's outrageous. I think it's very indecent, and it's setting a very bad moral example for the country, for the kids. And that's
Coulter, why do you call it treason?
Well, I just have felt for a long time this is a conspiracy, and there's too much. I mean, it's so self-evident by just listening to the comments. They're so full of venom. It's so unpatriotic. I don't understand it, and I hope Anne will watch this tape after, and maybe she will see just what her remarks are doing to this country.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to get this exactly right. Perhaps the caller is concerned about comments like this. President Clinton's behavior is indefensible, outrageous, unforgivable, and shameless. That is a quote from the president's lawyer at the impeachment trial. This is what I mean about people being more upset. You know what it is analogous to? It is like abortion. People get very upset, you know, at the pro-lifers showing pictures of mangled fetuses. Oh, that's so awful to show pictures of that. They're not the ones mangling the fetuses. I'm not the one molesting the intern. I'm not the one lying under oath. I'm not the one being indefensible, outrageous, and shameless. This is simply describing what the president is doing. Oh, and this, I do love to hear about conspiracy theories on the left. I hate to think that we're the only ones with nuts. But the idea that this is a Republican plot, I think is somewhat given the lie to by the fact that the Cox Committee has voted unanimously, the Democrats as well as the Republicans, for the report which describes the suspected spying at Los Alamos and is going to be released tomorrow, incidentally.
Would you expect, if you ran against Chris Shays, to debate him?
I certainly hope so, repeatedly.
Do you think he would debate you?
I hope so.
If you do not run against him, you think any other conservatives in the Republican Party will run against him?
Oh, yes.
I mean, is it in the, are you just one of many that feel intensely about him? I mean, is this...
No. Yes, I am one of many. And if I don't run, there are many others.
But will there be lots of people running against him, or if you run, you'll be...
No, I mean, that's part of what I would consider. I don't want to step on any toes, except Republican Party toes in Connecticut if they're going to support him. But if there's some other candidate waiting in the wings, ready to make a go of it, I would not interfere with that.
Osage Beach, Missouri.
Hi, good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Hi.
Oh, first of all, two quick things. First, it's so refreshing listening to you like a spring rain. Someone expressing what they really are. It's unusual today. My second thing is, I think the government is turning into a Clintonville land, and nothing's sacred there. Even the senator is a little bit cringing, and that disturbs me.
Unfortunately, the Republican senators backing down really isn't anything new. But it really is amazing that even this completely weakened president can still run circles around the Republicans.
I've got 4 things here you feel strongly about. I need a 5th. In a campaign, we got the Coulter campaign.
Oh, you're putting together my platform.
Yes, I want to know what you've got free speech and freedom, you know, freedom from federalism.
No, freedom for real federalism, which would be, okay,
guns,
we'll put down
abortion.
as number 5, keeping our money.
Keeping our money.
Yeah.
And what do you mean?
I mean, I suppose that is part of, so much comes out of number 4, which is federalism and following the Constitution. As I say, there's not an enumerated power for an enormous, massive federal pension system known as Social Security. Or all of these entitlements. If the government were limited to what it has the constitutional authority to do, you would not be sending in half your paycheck to the government.
Do you have a favorite politician in history, or somebody that you follow or did follow, from either their, maybe what they had to say in life about politics and things like that?
Well, I hate to sound cliched, But I think it would have to be Ronald Reagan. And I think it's worth mentioning every time Ronald Reagan's name is invoked. Until he won in 2 landslides, he was denounced in the pages of the Washington Post, compared to a Nazi. The Republican National Convention that nominated him was literally, I mean, the other was indirect, compared to a Nuremberg rally. If you go back and look at the articles on LexisNexis, until Ronald Reagan proved to be such a successful politician, everyone was saying this is going to be another Goldwater debacle. He's an extremist. He's a right-wing crazy. He'll never get any place. It turns out there really is a silent majority in this country.
This on the front page of today's Washington Post. After a quiet spell, justice finds voice. Conservative Thomas emerges from the shadow of Scalia. He's been known by the company he's kept, says Joan Biskupik. For the past 8 years, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has walked in the shadow of Justice Antonin Scalia. The pair have voted together more than any other 2 justices, staking out the court's conservative flank, but also inspiring criticism that Thomas is simply a clone or a puppet of the forceful, fiery, tempered Scalia. Why in the 8 years wouldn't he be portrayed, why wouldn't Antonin Scalia be portrayed as walking in the footsteps of Justice Thomas? I mean, do you have any...
Yeah, that's a good question.
How does this happen? How does it happen that it did for 8 years?
Well, I think it's completely unfair, so I'm not really sure why it happens, and I won't ascribe motives to the people who do this, but yeah, they vote together a lot. I don't think that means anyone is walking in anyone's shadow, and this is hardly the first time. They're talking about the Privileges or Immunities case, I suspect, decided last week, which Thomas dissented. Scalia did not. It's a very important case. But there have been other cases in which they have not voted together, but yeah, they both take the Constitution seriously. It's not really that surprising. They vote together a lot. And I don't recall this being said a lot of Justice Brennan and Justice Marshall, of whom I bet it was more true, especially toward the end. I bet in the last 5 years, I wonder if they ever voted differently.
Joan Biskupik says in the Washington Post that Justice Thomas has secured his place as the most conservative justice on the court. As we go to Ortonville, Michigan. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Brian.
Hi.
You don't have a line for freedom-loving individuals. Please comment on this. The shootings have less to do with the social issues and more to do with body chemistry. If these kids had tryptophan available to go along with the antidepressants they were taking, it is unlikely these tragedies would have occurred. Tryptophan is a natural product. The body needs to produce serotonin, which makes you feel good. And due to a bad batch some years ago, the FDA outlawed tryptophan. And now kids are taking chemicals to feel normal. And the problem with these chemicals is that they don't help the body produce serotonin, and it only uses up faster the serotonin it already has. And then when that runs out, they have these uncontrollable violent feelings. So, do you have any comment on that?
No, I think this is very interesting, and it is being looked into, that a lot of these kids in the shootings were on one type or another of an antidepressant. It's worth looking into. It's interesting. I don't know that there has been any conclusive evidence yet that that is what it is. And I suppose you do have a little bit of a chicken and the egg problem. The sort of person who is taking an antidepressant has some sort of problem to begin with. But I do think this is an interesting issue, and I'm looking forward to seeing whether they were all on any antidepressant, the same antidepressant, though I don't think we're ever going to get rid of evil in the world.
At the risk of upsetting the audience this morning, as some of our callers suggested they didn't like this program, I want to bring up, I saw this picture, and it just kind of dovetailed with your article in... You can see it on the screen over here. It's bride Vivian Edge, 81, kisses her husband Eugene Swikert, 95, after the ceremony performed by Pastor James Melton at Christ Crossman United Methodist Church here in Washington. I thought it was just kind of a picture of the day.
Oh, that is sweet.
There was something about a dog in this. I guess he's got a dog, and she doesn't like the dog.
Is this their first marriage?
I don't think so. You never did explain that column, I guess, and you know we're getting down near the end. And before we lose you, I want to make sure that you get a chance to do that. The column in George Magazine about dating. Now, your premise on this about men in Washington, again, state it flat out so that everybody knows where you're coming from.
It's not what they say there. Ignore that.
When it comes to dating Washington's young male, Democrats and Republicans have a lot in common. They are dull, cheap, and clueless. It's enough to drive a woman out of town.
I totally do not say that. That is completely untrue.
Close.
No, I don't at all. In fact, I saw that little quote box, and I said to my editor, you can't say I say that. And they said, oh, it'll get people to read it.
No,
They weren't even. I have one small narrow complaint. They don't know how to ask for dates. They call up and say things like, "So when are we going to get together? Call me when you'd like to have dinner." And then I draw many important and large, interesting sociological points about the entire city of Washington, the nation's capital, from this interesting fact. And as I said, I was at a party on Saturday night, and Washington women kept coming up to me and saying, "Totally right."
I like, though, but you do point out that men can call your answering service and ask you straight out for a date, and that might work. It saves
Yes,
you.
I'll respond by email.
Lima, Ohio, for Ann Coulter. One more call after this one. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, I'm a liberal libertarian, and I like Miss Coulter for a couple of reasons. One, she's shown how little that's out of touch a lot of the people on her side of the aisle are when it comes to tactics used to bring down this president, because they thought sure they had him, and for a while I thought they had him too, but eventually the truth came out. Lucy Ann Goldberg, the Paula Jones lawyers,
DNA evidence,
Star, on and on the whole list. I'm sure, according to Ann, it's just a coincidence that they all happen to, cross-pollinate, for lack of a better word. And, they had nothing to do with they're all opposed to Clinton. Okay, we'll push that aside. But then let's move on to something else. Ms. Coulter was complaining about personal attacks on her, and some of them were kind of vicious, I agree. But I've seen her on politically incorrect, denouncing the president's genitalia, calling him a pervert, and things like that. Now, that's as personal as you can get. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I think Clinton, he's not perfect, but the American people understand that it's worse to have the government sticking his nose into people's private life in order to prosecute them when they can't get them for something else than for him to get away with it.
Thanks, caller.
I haven't called the president anything worse than his own lawyers and flacks have called him.
Barrington, Rhode Island, last call. Go ahead, please.
Of course, that took the DNA evidence for them to admit it.
Ian, I'm thinking about moving to Connecticut from Rhode Island so I can vote for you. It would be great if you ran and you ran a Jesse Ventura type campaign, and I think Chris Shays. I watched his town hall meeting on C-SPAN, and it was just a little bit too much. And I think there's enough people anywhere that you choose to run who would come out and support you and send in their money to help with your campaign.
Thanks.
Thank you.
What are the percentage possibilities you're going to run?
Let's see, does the FEC have any rules on this?
The chairman's coming next. Here, Scott Thomas, the chairman of the FEC, is next. Right here. You can
I'd
ask
say
him
it's
when he comes
a
in.
little more than 50-50.
A little more than 50-50. Now, George Pataki, as you know, is going to have a news conference today. Been on big, lot of press on this. The last suggestion was he was going to endorse George W. Bush for president.
How bold.
Who's your candidate for president?
I'm waiting to see which of the presidential candidates in the Republican primary the New York Times first denounces as an unelectable right-wing extremist. Whichever one the New York Times tells us is unelectable is my candidate. I like Buchanan, Quayle, Forbes. Sure, there are a few others. I'd say those are probably my top three.
Ann Coulter, legal reporter for Human Events, columnist for George Magazine, hometown New Canaan, Connecticut. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now continue with more from Washington Journal as we talk with Scott Thomas, chairman of the Federal Election Commission. He joined us today to talk about electronic campaign contributions.